Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Art Museum of the Americas panel discussion on Jandy Pavone. I am Pablo Zúñiga, now the former director of the Art Museum of the Americas at the Organization of American States. We're the first museum of Latin American and Caribbean modern and contemporary art in the United States. Well, after 30 years at the organization, I've recently achieved my lifelong aspiration of retiring young and learning and practicing music. But I will continue to dedicate myself to promoting the Art Museum of the Americas and its historic collection. And I want to invite each one of you to join us in promoting what is today more than ever a very important collection and which constructs the identity of so many of us that now call ourselves Latinxes. I'd like to pass the word on to my now former boss, who will start the program with a welcoming remark. I'd like to introduce to you Ambassador James Lambert. James Lambert is, I would say, the pioneering secretary who has dedicated these 5 years and beyond to promoting the Art Museum of the Americas. Ambassador Lambert, nice to see you.
Pablo, thank you very much for the introduction to this important virtual event, and thank you also for your stellar contribution to the Art Museum of the Americas in your 4-year period as its director and to the OAS before that. This is a very exciting moment when we're going to have and host this panel discussion at the Art Museum of the Americas on this important exhibition, Quarantine, 40 Days and 40 Nights. And it's a privilege for myself to be part of the hosting of this event, and to oversee the Art Museum of the Americas is a privilege as well. I was just telling the artists that I feel a particular connection to this storyline today because I'm joining you from Canada, where I drove up on Thursday of last week, and to come into the country, I'm able to do so as a Canadian, but must enter a rigorous 2-week quarantine and have no contact with the outside world. So my wife and I are reprising to a small degree what all of us went through earlier in the year and what is documented in this exhibition, and is bringing back all of those memories. We are joined today, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce to those of you who don't know them, Geandy Pavón, a renowned photographer and artist, and his collaborator and artist, and I dare say muse in this important event, Imara López-Boada. Welcome to both of you, and I said before, very nice to meet you at last virtually. I've been very struck with this exhibition, and I'm delighted to be here at its virtual opening of this seminar. Also, the curator of the exhibition, distinguished professor from State University of New York at Geneseo, Lynette Bosch, is with us, and I look forward to hearing her comments, having read her lucid commentary on the exhibit. I look forward to hearing more about the background and the underlying strands that weave this important exhibition together. And then, of course, we have the executive producer of this exhibit, and who a close friend of the Art Museum of the Americas, and I'm glad to say of myself now, Laura Blanco. It's great to welcome you here with us, and to share the stage and the hosting duties with the past and current directors of the Art Museum of the Americas, Pablo, who has introduced himself, and Adriana Ospina, who is the acting director of the Art Museum of the Americas, will be speaking with us as well. And she is now the one who's carrying the torch forward. And again, this event is a remarkable achievement for ourselves as well as the participating artists. Jandy, in this exhibit, documented 40 days of lockdown, 40 nights of lockdown, Of course, the period has now gone on since March, longer than 40 days, but it's been a very active and interesting time, and it's been one for reflection, it's been one for discovery, it's been one for pushing the envelope and discovering new and innovative ways of doing the business of survival, doing the business of interaction, doing the business of recovery, dealing with the psychological strains and the opportunities and challenges that present themselves. And those challenges have been presented to the museum as well, in every bit as much as they have been to society as a whole. And I'm happy to say that it's really been a creative process which has been transformative for the Art Museum of the Americas and allowed it to push the boundaries, particularly of its social media presence and its virtual network of contacts. And in so doing, it has explored new parameters, 4 new walls, which are represented by the social media that they're working with: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And Quarantine 40 Days and 40 Nights, this extraordinary exhibition has, there's been a number of exhibitions that have been launched over this period. I would encourage you to check them out, but this is the most ambitious because it has its own associated interactive website, and we have daily postings along with, as I said before, the very interesting commentary that has been prepared by the curation team as well, led by Lynette. So again, with a special thanks to Laura Blanco and to the artists who are involved, I pass the microphone back, but I look very much forward to hearing the commentary that comes out of today's panel discussion and to hearing what questions may come forward from our audience. So thank you, Pablo. Back over to you and Adriana.
Thank you, Ambassador Lambert. And all I have to say is I'm really happy that Adriana Ospina will be my successor. And with that, I will turn it over to Adriana Ospina Jimenez.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you very much, Pablo. 7 months ago, overnight, our physical exhibition space temporarily closed. Under the leadership of our former director, Pablo Zúñiga, the museum quickly adapted and moved to digital platforms. Now, I invite you to visit our first contemporary photography exhibition, focused on the pandemic and its issues of health, isolation, and inequality. Conceived by multimedia artist Jandy Pavone, Quarantine 40 Days and 40 Nights is a travelogue of the imagination as told by a master storyteller. This exhibition is related to the core themes of the Organization of the American States, or the OAS. Those core themes are democracy, human rights, development, and security. The OAS is supporting the countries of the Americas during and after this crisis. Pavone's vulnerabilities and resilience echo those of the region, a region that was not prepared for the impact of the pandemic. The OAS's Joint Summit Working Group continue their high-level discussions to prove the importance of coordinating and tackling the region's health and socioeconomic issues, the very issues addressed in Pavone's work. At the end of our Q&A, please stay with us for a closing performance by Sofia Ribeiro and Juan Andrés Ospina of George Harrison's Beware of Darkness. We thank everyone who has collaborated with us on this project, and we are especially grateful to the great Paquito de Rivera for the soundtrack of the exhibition. We thank you, Jandy Pavone, Imara Lopez, Lynette Bosch, and Laura Blanco for sharing your thoughts today. And together, we hope that everyone enjoys this panel. So now I would like to introduce our first panelist, Jandy Pavone. Jandy Pavone is a multidisciplinary artist who observes and documents the ills that plague global society through photography, video, and paint. His studies into totalitarianism and ideology stem from his experience in the aftermath of the Cuban Revolution and have grown to include global conflicts. In the early 2000s, Pavone created a body of work for which he is still known today. These works include guerrilla projection of photographs of renowned dissidents and political prisoners on the facades of their corresponding embassies and consulates. Pavone's work has been featured in solo and group exhibitions through the United States and Europe, and is included in museums and private collections in both continents. Jandy, for the Art Museum of the Americas, it is a great honor to be hosting this exhibition of your recent work. When we received the proposal from Laura Blanco, we knew that the theme of the series was perfect for the museum, as well as its alignment to the OAS mission during and after the pandemic. We understand that you traveled to Buffalo, New York in early March to visit Imara just before the pandemic was declared. You brought very little gear with you, thinking that it would be a short visit. So how did you and Imara react to the possibility of being in isolation for an extended period of time?
Well, first of all, thank you. I want to thank the museum. I want to thank Laura Blanco. She's the mother. She really is the mother of this project. And of course, Pablo and you, Adriana, Lynette Bosch, who did a magnificent job, something that I could not do, which is an exegesis of what I did. So she was able to do it better than I. And of course, all the team and you, Mr. Lambert, Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. To answer the question, how did we react to this isolation? Well, like everyone else, we started listening to the news, but we were also very rational about it in our approach to that, because we tried to get rid of the hysteria and the talking heads, and we started listening and choosing the news that, you know, that came from the scientific community and the people that really know about this, a situation like this, a phenomenon like this. So we were very selective in not overflowing ourselves with the constant news about the pandemic. It is true, I traveled to Buffalo to visit Imara. Imara was my girlfriend at the time. We are now living together as a consequence of the pandemic, by the way. But I'll talk more about that later. But the news started coming from New Jersey and New York, the area where I lived, New York City. And many of my family members, many of my friends and in my family members, like my mother, my father, were infected with the virus. And until that moment, I had not realized how bad this really was, because this was not anymore something in the news. This was something that was affecting us directly. And so I decided to stay in Buffalo. Our first response was dealing with you know, all the problems that this situation brought. Like everybody else, going to the supermarket, trying to buy enough food and all the basics. But then once we had that covered, how you deal with time in isolation, in a quarantine period. And being an artist, I almost immediately decided to start working on something. We artists live and create sometimes in a type of environment similar to the isolation environment in which we were told to be during this crisis. So that's how the first photo came. And almost immediately, we knew it was going to become a series.
So how did the idea of the series develop from the first photograph?
Being on the quarantine as a catalyst, when the first photograph came, and we decided it was going to be a series, we started posting an image every day on social media. That's how we started. Now, quarantine has also a resonance for us in the Western Hemisphere, and in our culture, you have the 40 days of Jesus in the desert, and the 40 years that the Israelites spent in the wilderness. So we have in our imaginary, in our imagery of the world, we have these concepts of the quarantine, and they're very much charged with a lot of meaning. Quarantine is also an introspective journey. So we were in this, with our doors closed to the world. We were by ourselves, separated from the world, but at the same time, we are almost forced to this journey into ourselves, introspective journey, and that's also one of the things that made us create this series. As I said, artists create in isolation, so this was not something rare for me, because they also go out of the world to think of the world and see it from a distance. There's a beautiful, I think in one of the dialogues of Plato, Socrates tell us about a person that is looking at, somebody wanted to know the everything about the sun, and he was looking at the star directly, and he couldn't see anything until a wise man told him to look at a fountain, the reflection of the sun. And that's a metaphor of how thinking works, how we process. It's always, our minds are a mirror that reflects reality, and that's the process of thinking. And I think quarantine, our period in quarantine became that mirror to look at reality and reflect about reality in a much better way.
So at what point did you decide that this was a historical moment that you wanted to document?
I think after the first photograph, we knew that we needed to keep on going. I'm going to put it in my own words. I have been reflecting a lot about this. And to me, the COVID pandemic, it's like a universal vanitas, right? Every aspect of this pandemic is telling us that we are mortal, that we are going to die, that we are very vulnerable. And it's a remembrance of our own mortality. The same way the skull in a Baroque painting reminds people of decadence and death, I think this phenomenon has also brought us to the fact, especially in such a world like the one we're living in which people can get rid of everything that they don't like. They can live an alternative life in social media, for example, and we are not worried most of the time about our mortality. But this phenomenon brought us back to that and told us that carpe diem, you know, we need to live every moment as if it was the last one. This series commemorates not only those that have passed away as a result of the pandemic, and also those that are dying as we speak. This is not over. But it is also I'll say, a tribute to those that will survive it and that will be able to tell the story. The series is not strictly documentary. I like to think of the series as a document, not a documentary, because we didn't document whatever happened every day. It would have been very boring, right? It's very hard. There's nothing to tell. There's not as much to tell as when you create a document. That's what we decided to do. A document using our cultural backgrounds to reflect on a global experience. COVID, to me, brought back a lot of bad experiences that I had in my native country of Cuba, starting with, for example, scarcity. I've been here since 1996, and I never had to be in a long line to get a product, for example, or the fear we started feeling. I think since 9/11, I don't recall being in a situation as bad as the situation we were at. So to do this, we work with historical references. We have we of course check on the 16 and 17 plagues, 16 and 17th century plagues, and of course the 1918 pandemic. I think that it is remembered as the Spanish flu, wrongly. So we are now living through. We are now living this once more. You know, we are living this again, and the same way those phenomenons were keep appearing in our imaginary and in our lives. I think this one also will be very important in the future, and it is already part of humankind history.
So how were the historical references in quarantine born and brought to life?
So This idea came from a lifelong interest in the existence of certain archetypes. So all the images you see in this series, or most of them, they have as a reference an event, a mythological event or a historical event. But we wanted to produce an original work, not as a reenactment of those images that we already have and know, but to create a document with our personal history, our personal experience, but based in a new universal, this universal bank of images and myths and tales that we count on for this series, content to create this series.
And did you feel a sense of urgency to create this series? If so, why?
Yes, we felt the urgency. First of all, because we impose in ourselves this rigor of posting an image every day for 40 days. And it got to a point that people, I think after the third image, people were already waiting on social media for this image to be published. And but also because, you know, the type of art that I have always do, and the type of things and reference that I use for my work is always, it is always attached to the moment I'm living and to the historical moment we are living in. And that's why my themes are politics and social issues, things like that. Those are things that happen at a moment. And as an artist, I try to reflect on that while I'm living that. So we didn't want to wait and then someday tell this story and reflect on this, but we wanted to do it while we were living it. I think that's a much better approach.
So we see some humor in the images. Do you find joy in creating while in the middle of such tragedy?
Yes, there is humor. There is humor in the form of the highest, I think, representation of humor, which is irony. Irony is a combination of tragedy and humor, right? It's humor embedded with pain. And we decided to create these images in a sort of bittersweet way, because you know, it's also a tradition in Latin. I don't think it is only a tradition for the Cuban people. I think it's a tradition for the Latin American people in general, and it's to deal with harsh situations and tragedy with a bit of irony and humor. We Cubans know a lot about that. We have a long history of that. We have books written about that. About el choteo or the la burla cubana, the way we deal with very difficult situations through humor. And of course, but I repeat, this is not only a characteristic of the Cubans. We find that among the Jewish people and Black people, the Latin American people. So people that have gone through a lot of tragedy and horrible moments tend to do that. And that's some of the photographs use that resource to deal with reality, with the reality we were living and we are living.
Jandy, was there an image that did not work out?
No, there was. I have to say this, even though it might sound arrogant, I swear I don't want to sound arrogant, but there's something we are very proud about this series, Imara and I, and that's one of the things. Every image that came to our mind, we were able to produce it exactly the way we wanted. We went through a lot of problems and obstacles because I don't use, as a photographer, I never use Photoshop, for example. I use Photoshop only to trim the image, you know, for the colors, the lighting, as you will do in an analog laboratory. So my formation as a photographer is I started being an analog photographer, not a digital photographer. So that's the way I approach digital photography, as an analog photographer. And so that was one obstacle. I don't use Photoshop to create my images. So everything had to be placed on an scenario. The lighting had to be perfect, and then I will take the photo. That was one of the obstacles. And the other thing was that we didn't have the resources to do this. I was 400 miles away from my studio in New Jersey. So to produce something of this nature, you need a professional set of lights. You need flashes. You need, I don't know, you name it, everything you need to do something like this. And we didn't have it. We only had a camera, a couple of flashes, and that's it. Remote control for the flashes. So I started going to Home Depot and every store that was open at the time, the Dollar Tree. So I went out and bought flashlights, and we created light boxes, and we use aluminum paper to make these lights much more powerful. And that's how we created the series. So we not only had to produce the images, right, and take the photo. We had the obstacle of having to create the tools to be able to produce the series.
Did you listen to music while working? Why was it?
Not while working, because of something as simple as this. Imara has an unrelated work, a job that she works on internet, and she's on the phone all the time. So I couldn't play music during while I was creating the set in the morning, because this was a process. Every day, like about 5 o'clock or 6 in the afternoon, we will publish the image that people were already expecting to see. And when we finish all the process creating this photo, at night we will sit and reflect on, start thinking about the next image, doing research about the theme, reading, watching documentaries, movies, and then the next morning, Imara would start working, and I would start working on the set for the photo. The set was another big problem. We were in a reduced, very small space in her home at Buffalo. We didn't have a lot of space. Now, how do you manage to make this space look different every day, the same space? So that was another challenge that I forgot to tell you on the other question. But I only listened to music when I went out for some errands, you know, getting the flashlights or cardboard, whatever I needed for that day. And I listened to a lot of rumba and guaguancó. That's what I like the most. But I also like classical music and jazz. My friends make fun of me because I can listen to hip hop and Mozart, and for me it's as good. But I want to say something. I think this series has a musical background that I think is the best possible background for this series. And it is the music of my friend, Paquito de Rivera, who made a version, he played a version, original version of La Bella Cubana, a very nostalgic and beautiful Cuban song. And this was the idea of Laura Blanco. One day she called me and she said, can you tell Paquito to play something? I would love him to play this because I think it's the perfect match for this series. And of course, he being very generous as he is, accepted our request, and he ended up creating this magnificent musical piece for us.
So how did your thought process work as you were deciding what images to make?
So how was the process? I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, how did your thought process work as you were deciding what images to make?
Oh, okay. We were reading a lot, and we started. I started rereading the works by Ovidio and the Metamorphosis of Ovidius, and that's a huge source of ideas for any artist. I think every artist should take a look at it. I also went back to read about a Greek tragedy, Greek comedy, and all of these. So we were reading, watching movies. The cinematography has influenced me personally much more than any other type of form of art. And so we started researching and producing a work based on these archetypes. These were stories that were already told, and they're very successful. So what we did was using the same resources and the same universal ideas. We ended up, I hope so, creating a very personal collection of images based on these beautiful and universal themes. So that was part of the process. Now, the other part of the process is how to represent that, how to make that real. And thanks God, I had the best muse and actress and next to me, so I had her for this project, and she really was amazing. The same way, it was almost impossible to make an scenario look different every day, the same scenario. I imagine that for Imara was incredibly hard to be a different person in every photo, and I think she does it. I think she was very successful doing that. And yeah, everything is based for this project. Everything was based in history, and since isolation, it is in the quarantine period. It's a period where mostly nothing happens. Well, we went to history where everything had happened, and history is not only a way to tell what happened, it's also a way to tell us. You can find in history the future, the present. So in that sense, it's an ubiquitous type of knowledge that we can count on.
Thank you very much, Jandy. And this take us to our next segment of the panel, that is Imara Lopez. And for this segment, we're gonna change a little bit the dynamic. I'm gonna ask the question in English. Imara will respond in Spanish, and then I will read the answer in English. So Imara Lopez was born into an extensive Cuban theatrical family. Her mother was a symphony violinist at the Garcia Lorca Theater, where Imara spent countless hours immersed in all aspects of theatrical life. She trained in music, ballet, and contemporary dance. Her theatrical training was invaluable in the artistic direction of this exhibition, where she was muse, model, set, and costume designer. So Imara, welcome. And in your contribution to quarantine, we see elements of Cuba Santeria and Catholicism in the figures you enact. Can you tell us more about these traditions, what these traditions mean to you?
Gracias, Adriana, y gracias a todas las personas que han hecho que hoy estemos aquí discutiendo, ¿no? Y presentando la serie de la cuarentena. Laura, Pablo, Lynette, gracias a todos. Yo fui criada en Cuba bajo la influencia de las dos religiones, la religión yoruba, santería, y la religión católica. Es mi herencia cultural. Me viene heredada de mi madre, de su madre, y fue donde me crié. Es parte de mí, es mi naturaleza. Y esto es lo que traigo a la serie, a la cuarentena, mi herencia cultural, mi vivencia en la religión, lo que aprendí. Esto me da el conocimiento, por ejemplo, en una de las fotos que interpreté a Oshun, que es una deidad de la religión yoruba, de la santería. Oshun es representada o simboliza la divinidad femenina, la maternidad, el amor, la belleza. Oshun vive en el río, es la dueña de las aguas dulces. Y Oshun en la religión católica es la Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre, la patrona de Cuba. Ahí vemos el sincretismo de las dos. Esto me dio pues la oportunidad de traer a la serie mi cultura, mi manera de vivir, es como me conduzco, ¿no? Es una actitud ante la vida que llevo con esta herencia me trajo los recuerdos de cuando en casa, cada semana nos reuníamos en casa de la abuela, toda la familia, en busca de, pues, de guía, de consuelo, si alguien tenía algún problema. Así que, siendo mi esencia, sí creo que fue uno de los aportes importantes que hice al hacer.
In Cuba, I was raised to follow both traditions. Cuban Santeria is a spiritual practice that incorporates elements from African religions into Catholic figures, such as saints. In this tradition, African orishas, or deities, are brought into sympathy with Catholic saints. For instance, in one of the photographs, I present the Ochun deity. Ochun manifests divinity, femininity, fertility, beauty, and love. She is also connected to divination and destiny, and she is linked to the bodies of the water as life. Ochun aligns with the Virgin Mary, the Star of the Sea, and the patron of the Saint Cubans, la Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre. This combination of Catholicism and the African has always been a part of my life and has played a role in my family for generations. My mother's family passed down these practices. This knowledge was one of my contributions to quarantine. This project allowed me to bring together performance and my spiritual life, and it was being enormously fulfilling. It brought back fun memories of our weekly family gatherings in Cuba, where everyone received guidance and recognition. So, Imara, your performance in quarantine was exceptional. Could you please talk about how you created your personage?
El haberme criado en un ambiente de artista cultural, creo que me dio la base y las herramientas para poder crear los personajes. Vengo de una familia de músicos, violinistas en su mayoría. Mi abuelo era violinista de la Orquesta Sinfónica de Cuba. De hecho, fue compañero de Paquito Rivera, y el que él pues haya puesto la música para la serie es una bendición, me da mucha alegría. Mi madre es violinista, tocó en la Sinfónica, tocó en la Orquesta de Ópera y Ballet del Gran Teatro de La Habana. Mi tía toca el cello, también en la Orquesta de Ópera y Ballet, y actualmente en la Sinfónica Nacional. Mi hermana es violinista, mi primo toca el violín y el piano. Entonces yo crecí en este ambiente, escuchaba cada día a mi hermana practicar el violín, iba con mi madre a los ensayos y a las presentaciones del teatro. Entonces estaba antes de que comenzara la puesta en escena y durante, y ver todo aquello a una niña tan pequeña, pues definitivamente que sí, que me marcó. En algunas ocasiones tuve la oportunidad de tener pequeña participación en escena cuando hacían falta algunos niños extras en alguna zarzuela y estaban los niños de los músicos ahí, pues era lo que tenían a mano, y fue una experiencia increíble. Como niña, estar encima de un escenario, poder participar de todo esto era mágico. Esto me da a mí también el conocimiento, instintivamente casi, de saber cuando Jandy me decía, esta es la foto del día, o quiero que luzcas así, de saber qué vestuario, qué maquillaje debí usar, la pose. Me ayudó mucho. De niña tomé clases de ballet, clases de danza moderna, clases de música, clases vocales. Entonces, sí tenía todo este conocimiento y toda esta experiencia dentro de mí, y la cuarentena fue la oportunidad de vida de poder yo expresar y desarrollar todo esto, poderlo llevar, o sea, poderlo llevar así, a escena, todo combinado, mi vida espiritual, mi conocimiento o experiencia en el arte me dio la herramienta. Hay una foto en particular que tuve que hacer uso de todas estas habilidades que tenía yo y que descubrí en esta serie, que es la foto de la Magdalena. En esta foto Jandy quería que la Magdalena fuera muy dramática, muy teatral. Y un momento en que me dijo, mira, quiero que haya llanto, quiero que llores, y me sugirió que usáramos una cebolla, que pusiéramos gotitas de agua en los ojos, y me sentí muy ofendida porque le dije, no, después de todo esto que yo he vivido, yo lloro en la Magdalena. Y de ahí me agarré, me conecté a lo que estábamos pasando, a la situación que estaba viviendo, que todavía continuamos viviendo, y traté de enfocar a mi Magdalena en que era la persona que estaba abogando a lo que hay afuera, a Dios, al universo, a lo que a cada cual le dé consuelo o fe. Y para mí la Magdalena en ese momento era lo que estaba abogando por todo el mundo, por toda la humanidad que está pasando por este momento tan terrible. Y de ahí nació la Magdalena con todo, música clásica, sonaba en mi cabeza todo el tiempo, y ahí pude conectar con todo eso y pude darle la Magdalena que él quería.
I grew up in a theatrical family. Many were musicians, especially violinists. I spent my childhood in theaters, listening to my family play and be part of the theatrical life. I studied voice, dance, and several instruments. I was also a child performer when needed. As a result of this early experience, I was able to bring to quarantine ideas of staging, costumes, props, illusions, and then I became the character. For me, the series was an opportunity of a lifetime because it gave a voice to all that I had observed and learned. I was forced to access emotions for each character, and Magdalena is a perfect example. Jandy wanted tears and suggested the use of onions or eye drops to stimulate my tears. I was offended by the suggestion. I'm reminding him that I can dig for those feelings and find them on my own. Magdalena is the perfect example of my spiritual and creative lives coming together. I use an internet soundtrack too, mostly opera. So Imara, how were your lives impacted by the pandemic?
Fue terrible, como creo que nos impactó a todos, las noticias, toda esta desgracia, todo este horror, esta tragedia, tanta muerte. Fue traumático. De momento tu vida cambia de un día para otro, literalmente, y pierdes todo tu norte, ¿no? No sabes cuál es el siguiente paso. Fue trágico, me impactó como a todos de una manera muy, muy terrible. Por otro lado, nos dio la oportunidad a mí y a Jandy de vivir juntos, de crear este proyecto, la cuarentena. Le tenemos que dar las gracias, creo que al COVID, en ese aspecto positivo, que es lo que puedo sacar. Y nos dio la oportunidad de eso, de dejar un legado, de dejar un poco de esperanza en todo esto tan terrible que estamos viviendo. Hay un antes y un después, creo que para el mundo en general y para mí personalmente. El haber podido tener la oportunidad de trabajar en la serie, de traer todo lo que hay en mí, mi cultura, mi manera de ver la vida, nuestro punto de vista, creo que qué es lo positivo que me llevo. Y espero que cuando pase todo que va a pasar y la gente recuerde el 2020 como el año siniestro de tanta tragedia, la serie Cuarentena sea ese punto que les deje esperanza, que les deje amor y luz, que todo, espero que todo pase y que sea esto el legado que deje la cuarentena y que lo disfruten.
We were impacted on many levels. First, there was the horror of the sick and dead. The daily numbers were stressful to watch. On the other hand, there were positive moments. Jandy and I started to live together, and the circumstances enhanced the community for both of us. The opportunity to work with him on quarantine was a plus. COVID is a turning point in the history of the world, and it was a turning point in my life. What comes after should be a time of spiritual growth for all of us. Hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll look at these photographs and see something positive. Hope. Thank you very much, Imara, for being here today.
Well, that was spectacular. It was such a joy. We've run about 10 minutes over, but it was such a joy to be able to hear both Jandy and Imara express themselves. Our next panelist is Dr. Lynette Bosch. She has her PhD from Princeton University. She is a SUNY Distinguished Professor at the State University of New York, Geneseo, and founding chair of its Department of Art History. Her publications include Cuban American Art in Miami, Exile, Identity, and the Neo-Baroque, The Cuban and American Art of Alberto Rey, and a recent publication of Cuban American painter Demi. Her numerous curated exhibitions include Ernesto Barrera, Chilean artist, Museo de Bellas Artes in Santiago de Chile, with accompanying book and Latin American art exhibitions at Brandeis University, Case Western Reserve University, Binghamton University, and the Isabella Gardner Museum of Art. Among her many awards is a National Endowment of the Humanities grant, shared with Jorge Gracia and Isabel Alvarez Borland, and a Bunting Institute Fellowship at Harvard University, as well as an Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Fellowship at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Lynette, first of all, I want to take a moment to express how thankful and grateful we are that you agreed to write the exhibition essay. Quite a work. It's broad, it's focused, highly informative, and humorous. What attracted you to this project and compelled you to write about it?
Well, I've known Jandy for over 20 years, and his work interested me from the beginning. And I incorporated him into my book on Cuban American art. I've followed his work over the last 2 decades, and when Laura Blanco brought the opportunity to me to once again work with Jandy, I jumped at the chance. The subject was timely, but it also appealed to me because of its intellectual content, derived from classical mythology, historical figures, contemporary events, and the history of art. All of it blended into a cohesive and very original statement. Once I saw the series, I understood that it captured the essence of the lockdown in a philosophical, religious, and political manner. And so it was irresistible. I had to say yes.
Well, fantastic. Given your background, we understand your knowledge of art history, that's clear. But would you speak to us about your understanding of diseases and pandemic? When did you first become interested in these subjects, and are they topics that you include in your teaching practice?
Yes, indeed. I actually first became interested in the idea of pandemics when I was doing my doctoral studies at Princeton. I worked with the late John Plummer, who was the curator of manuscripts at the J.P. Morgan Library in New York. And I focused on the monsters of the apocalypse of St. John and on the plagues that denote the end of the world. When I started teaching, I taught classical art, and I taught the description that Thucydides gives in the Peloponnesian Wars of the plague of Athens, which took place around 430 BC. I also taught medieval art, and I teach medieval art. And of course, the 6th century plague of Justinian, which killed about 50 to 60% of the people in the places it touched, is part of the history of early medieval art. And then, of course, for Renaissance art, we have the Black Death of 1347 and 48, which is a staple in terms of developing ideas about how, in its aftermath, the Renaissance arrived. And for us, of course, what Jandy has done is that he has linked together this history of pandemics. Most recently, of course, we think of the 1918-1920 flu pandemic, to the literary work of 14th century writers such as Giovanni Boccaccio, who's the Decameron, recounts how a group of people went into quarantine and passed the time telling stories. And this is exactly what Jandy does in his series. And he ties together history, historical pandemics, the everyday experience of people during pandemics in a part that makes this series very much a reflection of our contemporary world, but in dialogue with a historical continuum.
Well, the way you have put a confluence of the current affairs, the pandemic, and art history and quarantine is really important for us because it ties in also these topics at the Organization of American States, which General Assembly is starting this week. Could you tell us about how you felt about the confluence of all of these elements in the exhibition?
Well, I think that one of the things that is very compelling is that we are living in the moment of COVID, and it is a political pandemic in the sense that it has hit the entire global polis of the people, and it's hitting the wealthy, it hits the poor, it hits everybody in between. We're all linked by COVID, and we're linked to a history that we all share. So very much what I see happening in terms of human catastrophe, but also human survival in the aftermath of catastrophe, is very much found in Jandy's Quarantine series, which is so well enacted by him and by Imara. They really do give us a window into how art can bring hope of continuity. And it is a reminder that we have indeed suffered and survived similar in the past. And that what we can take from the pandemic is what will be used to rebuild the world that will follow COVID. So Jandy's vision is that we will take the best of ourselves and we will move forward to work together as he did with Imara to make that vision come true.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And thank you once again, Lynette, for your contribution to this exhibition and for being here this afternoon. Our next and last panelist is our dear friend and colleague, Laura Blanco. Laura Blanco is a pro bono advisor to museums and institutions on matter of governance, ethics, and development. She was a producer in the entertainment industry for over 20 years. Ms. Blanco has served on numerous boards and committees within the areas of architecture, music, theater, and fine arts. She and her husband have been collecting art by Cuban American artists for over 25 years and are the founders of the In Art We Trust Foundation and Museum. Thank you, Laura, for everything. Laura, as the producer of this exhibition, could you tell us why you brought this wonderful project to us here at the AMA?
Thank you, Pablo. I really hate closing a show. Thankfully, we have some music to look forward to. But to answer your question, we had already been doing some work together so that it was natural that I approach you first with an idea, especially with this idea. Then the pandemic hit, and that changed everything. Early on, there was a sense that this event was going to disrupt things. and that these changes were not temporary. The way museums are run, the use of technology, the audience's experience, all changed almost overnight. The ability to adapt was key early on. We formed a small, limber group, free of bureaucracy, but with one goal, to successfully put this exhibition together. The OAS was already working on their mandate to assist the communities in their countries, and that fact dovetailed nicely with the theme of the exhibition. So you see all of this symmetry and repetition and the way things work. When they are meant to work together, they are really meant to work together. And it was an easy fit every step of the way, as it happened in an organic manner.
Well, you sure did orchestrate this quite well. We spent many days working, and you were very much involved in putting it all together with the numerous actors. Again, I just want to recognize you and thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about your In Art We Trust Foundation and its role in this exhibition and work in the future?
My husband and I have been collecting art by Cuban artists for over 25 years. We have about 300 works of contemporary Cuban art by 75 artists in our collection, and a reference library of over 6,000 volumes. The works are on canvas, paper, photography, sculpture, and it also includes artist books. Thematically, there is a hard divide. The works focus on the figurative, which also includes quite a bit of focus on the Afro-Cuban figure. And then we go into the whole area of abstraction. That's the secondary collecting practice that we have. So my husband and I started the foundation about 2 years ago because we saw a need to assist these artists. Our aim is to give artists flexibility to do their work and to provide them with greater visibility through the foundation's work with institutions. So yes, collaboration with other institutions is extremely important, I think, to all of us, especially at this point.
Well, thank you once again. And now in my new role as a promoter of the museum, I will be working very closely with you and with other institutions, obviously, such as our friends of the Art Museum of the Americas and other institutions. I encourage everyone who's here listening to get involved in the museum and join us in promoting its work. I'm going to turn the floor over to my successor, Adriana Ospina, who is going to do the questions and answers.
We are running out of time, so I would like to only do one question, and it is a very interesting question that I think it's perfect. And there is a person, Jandy, who wants to know the specs of your camera, and I think that this is really important for the entire series.
Sorry about that. Okay, my camera, the one I use for this series, is a Sony 7R, A7R, I think it is. Yes, 3, Mark III. It's an amazing camera. I only had one lens with it. It was the 50mm lens. So all the series was, I shot all these photographs with a single normal lens, which what is known as a normal lens. It's a 50mm lens, which was good because it's a lens that has almost no aberration, and it also made this series not that the images look alike, but they look like they were seen through the same eye. Not only my eye as a photographer, but the camera also had only one eye. And I think that added to the finish of the project. It was an obstacle that became something good in this case.
Thank you very much, Jandy. So now I want to thank our panelists for being here today. And I would like to introduce you to